does in the space ship.
So what do they do when they go outside?
Closer to it.
When they go outside and they're fixing something on there, okay? And they're attached to the spaceship. Guess how fast that spaceship is going? 17,500 miles an hour.
It's faster than your dad drives.
And yeah, a lot faster. And to give you an example of how fast it is, if you were to go from New York to California, guess how long it would take? A little bit less, 3 to 4 minutes.
Wow. Isn't that something?
And every 45 minutes when they're out there, there's a sunrise and a sunset. A sunrise and a sunset, which means that every hour and a half is a new day. Wow. But they don't get any older. But
Isn't that nice?
Yes, but there's a possibility that they could grow up to 2 inches in space because there's no gravity holding them down. And they make the spacesuit a little bit bigger so that when they're out there, they're not going to be sitting like this. So, but when they come back down to Earth, guess what? They get back to their own height again. So you think you'd like to be one? Maybe. Okay.
So this is not a diaper. It's the maximum absorbency garment, the MAG. And essentially what it does is it's the base layer of the spacesuit that's right here that you just saw. And the astronaut would put this on before they would put on any other component of the suit. And it does the same thing as an Earth diaper does.
Inside the Skylab, and
This is a rotating litter chair. That's where you throw all the litter and it disappears.
litter chair. And there's an exercise bicycle right there. Waste management compartment right there. And that is the shower, where they take a shower. Right here. And here's a picture of one. Somebody taking a shower. And then that is the wardrobe and the food storage locker. The actual theater wasn't open today, but the museum was. And it told me all the different kinds of things about the theater, and it had his Gibson house where he died. All different kinds of things. They have 2 pillows, and they have carpet, and also there was the pistol that killed that was shot at Abraham Lincoln, and a lot of paintings, and a little board that jammed the door so that it was open, and then there was the door, and the door was white, and it had a lot of holes in it.
But he was looked down on and really turned against the English military. And so when he was 22 and his brother died and he became disillusioned with the military, he turned gladly to ranching, to plantation owning and running a plantation. He was a person who believed in being in control. He tried to make slavery more efficient. I already told you how he divided the slaves onto the estates that they worked on.
This is the garden at Mount Vernon. This is the Bowling Greens, and this holly tree, George Washington, is an original tree planted by George Washington, and so is that tree.
Originally,
That one
when he
right
inherited the estate, the road was recessed, and it came straight up between those gatehouses to the center door on this house. The original house was tiny. It extended from the center door to the end of the first two windows on either side, and there was a half story above. It was just a simple little house, the kind of immigrants would build. When Lawrence inherited the estate, he put this circular drive in front. It's called a court in English style. And Washington, when he initially inherited the estate at the age of 22, he concentrated on building the business. This was a tobacco plantation. The soil was already poor, had been in tobacco for several generations, and it was in even worse shape. But Washington also enjoyed the social life of being a gentleman planter, and so before the Revolution, he rode to the house. He went fox hunting every day for several hours, but his attention shifted when the Revolution came. In fact, he spent the whole 8 years of the Revolution at the front with his troops. And this super organized estate began to fall to ruin. Not really to ruin, but it was lax. It was managed by his cousin Lund while he was away, and he required weekly reports from all of his overseers during the Revolution, and it said that that was his means of relaxing, going over those reports, thinking about Mount Vernon, writing back plans for what he wanted done here. But after the Revolution, he came home and it really wasn't to his liking. Now, the house had been finished during the Revolution to be the way it is now. And then during the Revolution, these ends, the cupola, and that piazza on the east front, the defining feature, was added. So by the time the Revolution was over, the house complex looked like it does now. Of course, some of the decorating had to be completed. You'll hear about that when you tour the house. But after the Revolution, he got rid of this recessed road here and put in the bowling green. He's following a plan. And notice the pathways between the beds are grass. That's an indication in the 18th century that this is a working garden. Guests would not have come over here. Those grass paths are much easier to maintain than the gravel ones, which had to be rolled and raked. But this was organized to produce enough food to feed the hundreds and hundreds of yearly guests that dropped in and stayed for several weeks. You'll notice all the beds are bordered by herbs. Herbs were very important to life in those days. The fruit trees here are mostly espaliered up against the fences. Those are the stone fruits that require more heat to grow. The garden is bordered by, part of the fencing is original, brick fence to keep out animals, surmounted by a paling fence to allow some air circulation. You'll notice two cisterns in each of, to collect rainwater and to warm up the well water. Thought that well water was too cold, it would shock the plant. Now you see this little octagonal house at the west end of the garden? That's called a seed house. Washington employed European gardeners to oversee and keep the garden organized. The actual work, physical work, was done by the slaves, but they were managed by a European gardener. The corresponding house at this end, both of these houses are repeated in the other garden, but I didn't point them out because there was so much foliage you couldn't see them. This is what we would today call an outhouse. In those days, they called them necessaries.
Necessaries. So this used to all be grass.
The dung from all the animals that would have been put here. This is recreated, but it's recreated on the original site. On the very floor underneath everything are the original cobblestones. This was rebuilt about 3-4 years ago. But this area of the estate was very active. Would have been busy with animals and people. Now the slave children didn't start working in the fields until they were 6 or 7 years old. Their parents would be out in the fields, and so they would stay back here on the estate with older people that were past work, and of course, they weren't closely monitored, so they would have been running around. That lawn space out there was part of the entertainment area, so he wanted to keep them separated somehow. You'll notice this short brick wall that extends out to the tree bank. That's called a ha-ha wall. It's a step that's too high for the animals to step up and go over, so it acts as a natural fence, but it doesn't obscure the view, because part of the entertainment is this huge view shed of about 180 degrees. Because there was so much activity here, there were so many smelly activities, he planted trees along here that would be fairly low. He called them clever trees, trees that had flowers and flowers that produced a pleasant scent, like magnolias, lilacs, almost as a dog bone. And then the piazza is kind of up on a berm. If you take a river trip, you look back and this house just floats above the landscape. And that was part of George Washington's design. This is part of the entertainment space. Of course, the piazza is like a big patio. The family took tea out there whenever the weather permitted. Guests could sit out there and enjoy the view. In fact, if you'd like to go sit on the piazza, you can do that as well. Now, below here is something called a hanging wood. It was planned that the tree should never reach above the level of where we're standing now, so that they would frame the house. Down on the flat next to the water was the deer park. This was just like a gentleman's estate. Now, of course, after Washington's death, the house fell almost completely to ruin. It was inherited by 3 nephews in succession. He had no children. During his lifetime, he'd had hundreds of visitors every year. He was the most famous man, most revered man in the country in the 19th century. And every year, hundreds of people continued to come here to Mount Vernon to see where he lived. And under the burden of all those guests, the house began to fall to ruin. The whole estate became overgrown. That's why the gardens became overgrown and had to be replaced. This hanging wood was allowed to grow up so tall that from the 2nd floor of the house, you couldn't even see the river. The river is part of the charm of this estate, this beautiful view. Now, after World War II, one of our vice regents of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, who bought and saved the estate, looked out here and recognized that this view was part of Mount Vernon. She also looked around the area, the metropolitan area, and recognized what was going to happen, how it was going to become clogged and overgrown as it is. So she had the wherewithal to buy 400 acres of Maryland shoreline over there. On plantations for there to be a family tomb, and generations of the family would be laid to rest inside the family tomb. This family tomb was built by George Washington's half-brother Lawrence. Remember, Lawrence is the one that he inherited the estate from. George Washington outlived most of his family members. He was 67 when he died. When he came home from serving as our first president at 65, he recognized that this tomb was in bad repair. It was already falling apart. It's too close to the river. But he also recognized, too, that he was an old man, especially by his family standards. And he didn't think he would live long enough to build a new tomb. 6 months before he died, he wrote his very last will. It was a long document. You can see one of those pages if you stop in and see our museum. Part of it was devoted to his wishes for a new tomb. He asked his family to build a new tomb, and then to remove his remains and everybody else's to the new tomb. And then, 6 months after he wrote the will, he died. Very quickly, very suddenly. You'll hear about that when you go through the house. But it was before the new tomb was built, so he was buried here. Would be a better place for all people to live. And so people like to come here and pay their respects. They like to lay a wreath if they can. And for those of you who've signed up for the congressional tour, you have the opportunity to lay the wreath. Now this wreath is made out of boxwood, that plant that lined the garden beds in George Washington's estate. I'm going to take the rope down, and if you girls would like, you can each put a hand on this and take it in and set it between the two sarcophagus.
You're going to set it between the two, okay? Here it is. And don't drop it. Be careful. Okay. Lift it straight up. Yeah, good, Isabella.
How about that? Very good, girls.
Yeah. And there's...
Go ahead. That's okay. Sorry. That's okay.
Okay, this is the White House right behind me. I just went in it, and it has a lot of different color rooms, and they actually have names for them. Like, one is a room that's all red, pretty much, and it's called the red room. There's a blue room, and there's a green room. And also there's a lot of security, and there's this huge, really beautiful garden. And and inside it's really, really pretty. There's all these different kinds of sculptures and stuff. And there's a picture of Angela Simpleton Van Buren, which is the daughter of the President Van Buren. And he was a widower whenever he became elected, so that his daughter became the first lady, pretty much. Another picture of a man named Taft, and he was the heaviest president, and once he was taking a bath and he got stuck in the bathtub. And another time he was sitting down at the ball, watching a baseball game, and he was sitting in a chair and he wanted to stretch his legs, and it was the 7th inning. And well, he got up, and then everybody else got up, and that's what the 7th inning stretch came from, and that's about it. This is the archives, where the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights is here. And there's a lot of really neat history in the archives.
Great Experiment Hall. It starts off with Leif Erikson leaving from Scandinavia and coming in through to Nova Scotia. And so we start off there with the Vikings coming to America, and we move on to the charters of the 13 colonies. We keep going down. You start to see that there are different moments in American expansion that people move through. So, we have Fort St. Augustine, Battle of Yorktown, which is
Show the Boston Tea Party right here. This is the Boston Tea Party.
This is the Boston Tea Party right here.
School was laid by Washington. That's President Washington in 1793. In 1800, the North Section was completed. Congress and the Supreme Court moved in. So Congress and the Supreme Court was housed in the same building at one time. It's right around the corner there. We're going to see it in a little bit. The south section was completed in 1807 and 1814. The British burnt the capital in an attempt to reclaim the United States. Obviously, they failed. The new chambers, the current ones for the Senate and the House, were completed right before the Civil War. Construction on the current dome began in 1855 and it was completed in 1865. Lincoln ordered the construction of the dome to continue during the Civil War to show that the Union was intact. And the statue at the top of the dome is Freedom, that's her name. She's 19 feet 6 inches tall, weighs 15 tons. She holds a sheath on her sword, a memorial of victory, and the shield of the United States. There's a funny story about the statue at the top, actually. It came over from Italy. A lot of us stopped in the Caribbean for a period of, I think, 2 years before they could build a boat strong enough to bring it home to the States. The Freedom is actually cleaned 3 times a year. It's a big thing. They come up with a helicopter and attach some cables to it. They literally remove it from the top, they bring it down, it's clean, and then she goes back on. And during the times of the Soviet Union, it would not be uncommon to see dissidents carrying around copies of the United States Constitution with them during the Soviet era. If you go over to the White House in Lafayette Park, you'll see that there's a bigger statue of him mounted across the left side of Andrew Jackson's stage. A lot of the monuments and buildings from that era are the legacy of the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt. So a lot of that money had come out here to build up our capital. If you look around here in this chamber, before we enter into the school chamber, you'll notice that the pillars are from cornstalk. They look like cornstalk, and that is, I don't know if it has any meaning in particular, but I don't really grow a lot of them. So, another link to our agricultural. Inaugurated as president, Dolly Madison spent her afternoons listening to arguments here. At the time of this room's use, the court did not impose time limitations for arguments, so a guy could stand here and talk for 5 days if he wanted to. The ultimate filibuster, and arguing the case sat at the front tables while the following case waited at the back tables. The busts on the wall are of the first 4 Chief Justices, and John Marshall served here for 34 years as Chief Justice. 20 of those years were spent in his room. So that answers that question. The Dred Scott case was decided here, and Chief Justice Tanya's robe and bust are in the cloakroom, and he set the clock 5 minutes ahead fast to ensure that the proceedings began on time. That this was actually purchased at an auction. So that's as far as it goes from that. We had to go the government's into a thrift spending marker here as again commemorating the Senate of the District of Columbia. Yeah, exactly where we were. 180 feet from the center mark of the floor is the apotheosis of George Washington. This fresco was painted by Constantino Bernini, a Roman painter. The apotheosis covers approximately 4,664 square feet, so it's pretty big. Most of the figures that are painted there are about 15 feet in height, stretch out. The apotheosis of George Washington was completed, I said, by Constantino Bernini in 1865. It took 11 months to complete. And he did it in scaffolding very much as you would do it, as Michelangelo did it on his back. It depicts George Washington as to the ascension of heaven. General Washington is actually covered in a purple blanket. And he is surrounded by 13 maidens, representing the 13 colonies. He's flanked by 2 female figures, Liberty and Victory. And you'll see that there are about 6 different depictions of events, and those are commemorating science, agriculture, marine, quest for knowledge, all those themes of academia and such. What you are looking at here, if you keep looking around, is what we call the frieze. It shows scenes of over 400 years worth of United States history, starting from the landing of Columbus all the way to the Wright brothers.
Bernini designed the scenes beginning with the landing of Columbus in 1492 and ending with the 1840 gold rush. He did that. Bernini also painted up William Penn and the Delaware Indians. While painting that scene, he stuck to the scaffold and he had to hang on for 15 minutes until he was rescued. I didn't know that. After that incident, Bernini only painted one more day. He hired Filippo Costagnini to complete the painting. Costagnini painted his face in the trunk of the tree between the death of Tutankhamun and the American army entering the city of Mexico. Okay, so that tree is actually right in front of us. Okay? And the story behind that is that Congress actually shortchanged him. And
So that was his revenge.
it was his revenge because he painted a court case that didn't sit well with Congress, so they fired him. So he sneaked in and did that.
And then Cox painted the rest, right?
Yes, and Alan Cox did paint the rest, and that's
Didn't you just read about the guy that fell this morning? He died a couple minutes later. Shot.
spring spot in a moment. I know everybody's excited to go see that. The group is kind of spread around a bit, but the house then moved out of this room in 1857 because it was too small and the acoustics were very poor. It got really loud in here. And what they had to do was actually put these curtain drapes around to kind of like lower the amount of noise that was going on here. Because if you were to get into a caucus, it would light up. Finally, now now houses 38 of the 99. Oh yes, this is the hall. This hall actually houses the most statues. At one point, there were so many statues that the floor actually started to sink. So they had to move some statues. They're put in specific order: bronze, marble, That's pretty much the general order of things. Talked about Father Serra, the Catholic missionary, father to change the California missions along the coastline in the late 1700s. So, I'm going to go ahead and take you to the spot.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yes, so it's definitely an interesting aspect of this trip.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's take you over here to they tried to burn it down. They also burned down the White House. And if you were to chip away enough at the paint at the White House, you can actually still see the burn marks from it. And an interesting story actually about the White House that we keep moving down. During the Clinton presidency, they had tried to repaint it, and they ended up finding that the paint kept slipping off.
We're on a train here and we're moving, so you might as well do it.
This is the Capitol building. I just went there today and I got to have a tour of it. It is very neat. It's very beautiful. And the tour of it had a lot of pictures and all different kinds of stuff, and that's where the congressmen work, if you didn't know that. And the person on top is the it's like a little sign for freedom. And then there is oh yeah, and somebody said I think the tour guide said that the person on top was so heavy that the boats that it kept going in sank, and so it had to wait at New Orleans till a really big sturdy boat came. And I also saw where they voted and where they work, the congressmen work, and it was very, very fun. And there's a lot of things to see in there. And John Quincy Adams, he actually had his desks in one of the rooms, and he had this. He would pretend he was asleep, and really people would be like arguing and stuff over there, and then they would call him up, and they would think he didn't know what they were talking about, but really he did because he was listening to them, and he would just say everything before they said it, and also one of the ways he heard about it, and if they were like really using really low voices, was there's a certain point where they stand and talk, and then it bounces up from the top and goes down to right where his desk is, and that was really neat. I got to experience that because there would be like, because some people talked and stuff.
On a permanent basis. Washington was sworn in up in New York, and then on a temporary basis they moved the capital down to Philadelphia, and then they're going, where are we going to have the capital of this country? And George Washington said, you know, I know a great place down from where I live in Mount Vernon. He said, it's just a swamp now. There's no city that's going to make a great location for a city of this emerging nation. Now, another advantage of having the capital here was already this country was being split in north and south states and cities. You had, you know, Boston and New York and Philadelphia to the north, and Richmond and Charleston to the south. So this was somewhat of a neutral site. So in 1790, they broke ground for the Capitol and the White House. So in 1800, these buildings were completed. The only two buildings we had in the government at the time, and the capital of the United States of America was formally transferred to the District of Columbia. Okay? Now, by 1800, Washington had 2 terms in office of peace. Now, her feeling, rightfully so, was it was during peacetime that civilization progressed, advances were made, things were done. And so you see her here, she's got an orb of knowledge in her left hand representing knowledge, learning. In her right hand, she has a scroll of learning. Now, when she felt that civilization was being threatened by war, she had to defend it. And so she would put down the orb, she would put down the scroll, and she would take up the sword. She was the Roman goddess of war and peace. Her counterpart in Greek mythology would have been Minerva. Athena. Okay, any questions? Government property, and on the right, good government. Now, right here in the center, you have government represented. In her lap, she has the words of Lincoln, the government of the people, by the people, for the people, right? And in her left hand, she's got the golden rule, do unto others. On the right here, you have a youth. Now, these are allegorical or symbolic type figures. You have a youth with a bridle. And what that is trying to tell is you got to have something there to hold government back. Don't let government go crazy, which governments can't do. Even to this day, they know that. And over here on the left, you have the Department of Defense, because whenever government is threatened, you have someone there to protect them. Now, let's go over to the bad side. The two bad sides. Look over here, what they say. The whole day, you know. But in any event, these are learning guidelines. One of the reasons they were in New York, where they had the artisans that were making mosaics for years. They made a mosaic from the painting. They brought it back and put it up just as you see it now. Again, I believe I mentioned the building that we're in right now is the building that opened in 1890. On the ground level, you see a series of concentric rows of desks. At the very center, there's a survey room. Okay, you've got your library card, and maybe you're working on your PhD dissertation. Who knows? But in any event, you know some books you want, and you have a field in which you're interested. You know there are a lot of books out there, and you may not have any idea what those books are. You go to talk to the librarian. They will assign a seat to you. And so depending upon how much material is required for whatever it is you're looking up, they will tell you to come back out there for a particular period of time, and that material will be waiting for you. You don't have to leave that day as long as your program continues. You keep that particular desk. Okay? The room we're in right now, okay. Well, the great room we spoke to earlier, that was 75 feet in height. This is a little more than twice that height, about 160 feet in height. Okay, it's a dome top, and why not the Parthenon in Rome? It's a dome within a dome. The outer part is structure, the inner part is plaster, and you can see the ribs, which is where the structure would be on the outer dome, come down and divide the dome into 8 sections. By the way, there's a space between the outer and inner dome. There's a spiral staircase that will take you all the way up into the top. Now, while you're looking up there, you'll see a series of figures. And what they do, what they represent is the evolution of 17.
I can tell you about it.
Flame of learning. It's a flame of learning. It's like a torch of learning. You know, a torch of learning. And then on top of the Capitol building, come back again. When you're 18, come back to the library.
Okay, this is the Library of Congress right behind me. And it does have a dome. I don't think you can see it right now. But it has a dome with flames on top, and the flames stand for freedom, just like the Capitol. And in there, I think it is the largest library in the world, and it doesn't only have books. It also has, it's like a museum sort of. It has two different kinds of Bibles, and there are very many books though, and I didn't actually get to see the books because you had to be 18 or older to go down there, and you had to actually have a library card to actually get in, which you get next door at the I think right
Monroe.
over there.
Okay.
This is the Supreme Court where the judges make sure that the congressmen laws are constitutional.
I am Sergeant Bowen of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, United States Army, Assistant Commander of the Relief, Note of the Unknown Soldier, a ceremony to our Right shoulder, horns. House. Right. Hey. Forward. March.
Before the American Civil War, so we gentled with the building. It was built to the George Washington Monument. It was built in 1802 to 1818 because George Washington raised kids, but more importantly, grandkids from Martha's first marriage. This is Martha's grandson's house in George Washington Park, Custis. And his son-in-law was Robert E. Lee, a future Civil War general. Robert E. Lee has 10 years of his married life here. Family crisis, wartime off in the U.S. Army. Robert E. Lee is here, rising to the rank of colonel in the U.S. cavalry. And I can go into great detail. I can let you in.
And the thinner ones I don't like at all. I don't like the little skinny things.
This is both small.
It is both. There's big and small here. But if you buy wood today, it's usually the 5 or the 6 or the 3 or the whatever you want.
Is the Arlington Cemetery, and that is where the presidents and all these important people, soldiers and generals, are buried whenever they died. And there's also a place called Arlington House. Actually, it wasn't really, but back then it wasn't an Arlington House. It was Robert E. Lee's home, and he lived there, and I got to see inside it. It was very pretty and neat, and there was a lot of children's bedrooms. And also there was the first ever person to be buried there was actually a girl, Mary Randolph. She was a descendant of Pocahontas, and she also was a cousin to all these, or related to all these important people like Robert E. Lee, for instance. And I think she was the one that built his house. And she was the first person to be buried there. And she was the one that started the Arlington Cemetery. And I also saw William Howard Taft. And his burial was very neat. And then I also saw John F. Kennedy. And John F. Kennedy has a huge rock with an everlasting fire on it. And then Jacqueline Kennedy, she was buried there in front of him, and then so was his son and daughter. And then also, but not in the same place, but near where Kennedy was buried is Robert Kennedy is buried. And that's, I think, his brother. And also there was the Challenger astronaut place where all of them were buried. And there was also part of a boat, and the people that were on the boat,
The
Maine, buried there, and on the Challenger there was a teacher on that plane or spacecraft. Right behind me is the Washington Monument, and this is a monument named after George Washington. But George Washington did not want it to be named after him. And Hawthorne was the one, he wanted to actual person to make it. It was actually the second designer of Washington, D.C. Rothwell was the first, and then there was a second designer after he died. And also, it took 86 years to build. I'm standing in front of the World War II memorial, and this memorial is for World War II, and it is very beautiful, and it has a lot of people here This is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and over 150.
No, 58,000.
Over 58,000 people are on this wall. It's black, and it has a reflection like a mirror, but a darker reflection. And it has a lot of names that you can. And you can trace the names. This is the Lincoln Memorial. It has Abraham Lincoln in it. It is very beautiful. And there are the Gettysburg addresses in there. And Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president. And he was president when the Civil War was here, and the second inaugural address is in right behind me is the Korean War